if you're looking for some solace there, it comes from the fact that on a 12-month perspective, the job losses have started to slow down. So what that tells me about the private sector, and I think this is an issue I'll be getting back to in a few minutes, what it tells me about the private sector is that, you know, once the recession set in, once companies saw just how bad it was getting, they reacted very aggressively in shedding labour. And many companies now find themselves in a situation where they've got rid of as much labour as they can without actually going out of business. So there's some sense of stabilisation. The public sector, interestingly, despite a jobs embargo and so on, particularly the health side of it, is still creating jobs. So the status of the economy, to summarise, chemical, pharma, IT are the biggest drivers of whatever bit of economic activity we have in the economy in 2010. Consumer spending, having collapsed, has stopped falling, but we are seeing very strong growth in savings, personal savings. So the money, at an aggregate level, the money out there in the economy hasn't gone away, it hasn't disappeared. There's still money out there, but people are saving it and they're paying down debt rather than spending. And at one level, this is necessary because personal balance sheets need to be repaired, just as is happening in the United States. However, if people are engaging in this sort of behaviour, it means they're not spending, so that is depressing economic activity. The plus from this is that, with such a high level of savings building up, if our policymakers can actually pull that trigger called confidence, that money will start to flow into the economy eventually. The construction sector is dead and is still deteriorating. There's no doubt about that. And given the excess stock of construction activity out there in the economy, there's no way it's coming back any time for the foreseeable future. Business investment is still weak. Companies are still in cost-cutting mode rather than in expansionary mode. As I said, credit conditions awful. Fiscal contraction will continue. Paul mentioned, one response to this sort of macroeconomic crisis would be fiscal expansion. Given the magnitude of Ireland's borrowing requirement and its mounting debt level, fiscal expansion is not an option. And I actually think, coming down on either side of the argument about whether it would be more appropriate for fiscal contraction or stimulation in the Irish economy at the moment, I think fiscal stimulation would be a waste of time, because I think the more money government pumps in is just going to go into the pool of savings in the economy. It would not generate any meaningful level of economic activity. So I don't think fiscal stimulation would actually work in the current environment. We need to sort out all of the other structural issues first. These are the latest population numbers in the year to April, released a couple of weeks back. And we saw outward migration of 65,300 over the 12-month period to April, of which the Irish made up 27,400, something over 40%. So we are seeing Ireland starting to do again what it did really successfully back in the 1980s, exporting our people, our talent again. And I suppose more than anything else, in my view, that is the biggest negative that we're living through as an economy and as a society at the moment. So the big issues for me at a macro level: the real economy, the housing adjustment, the public finances, the banking sector, competitiveness and personal debt. These are all of the structural issues we've got to work through over the next couple of years to get the real economy back on track, to get employment flowing in the economy again. The conditions for economic recovery, as I see it, obviously the international economic cycle is very important for a small open economy. It's starting, I've given you my view on that. I think it's going to be a slow, gradual process. A stabilisation of the housing market, having collapsed so dramatically. I think statistically it's interesting to think about what we've done here in terms of housing. Back in 2006, we built over 93,000 houses. The same year in the UK, around 180,000 houses. And if you consider the relative population sizes, it just shows that as an economy, we had got absolutely intoxicated on construction activity. And this year, we're going to build around 14,000 houses. So that's a decline of about 80,000 in the annual house build. Statistically, a decline of 10,000 new house builds translates into about 1.2% of the economic growth rate. So the story of the Irish economic collapse is explained first and foremost by the collapse that has occurred in the construction sector and all of the problems that have flown out of that. A solution to the banking crisis is necessary. There is a long way to go. It's going to be a painful process, but credit needs to become available in the economy as quickly as possible. An exchange rate improvement would be nice, particularly against sterling, which is a very important export market for indigenous exporters. It would be nice. A Waterford victory in All Ireland, from my perspective, would be nice, but highly unlikely. There's nothing we can do about it. And given the fact that we are in the single European currency, we cannot influence the nominal exchange rate of our currency. And it's worrying that at the moment sterling is starting to depreciate again against the euro. So that's not good for competitiveness. Fiscal certainty, we've got to rebalance the public finances, create a sustainable fiscal model. That will entail a significant broadening of the tax base, but also serious control over public spending. And the other issue that we really need to look at is the whole area of competitiveness. Competitiveness is not just costs, it's also, I think even more importantly, non-cost areas of competitiveness are extremely important. The cost base does need to fall. We really allowed the cost base of the country get totally out of control in the first 7 or 8 years of this decade. We need sensible public spending with a focus on outputs rather than inputs. We need cheaper housing, that's happening. Energy costs, professional fees, insurance costs, commercial rates, local authority charges, you name it across the board. We have got to get the cost base of the economy down, and we have to use the opportunity presented by this decent recession to get our cost base in order. Wage levels, we have seen a significant adjustment in wage levels in both the public and the private sector. We need a focus on the quality of the labour force. I think more than anything else, the one thing that will distinguish Ireland or not distinguish us over the coming decades will be the quality of the labour force. So the focus on education and training has to be paramount. And if government cutbacks are targeted at reducing the quality of the education system here, we might as well bail out. We're going nowhere. We're creating a low value added, low quality job environment. So education, training, quality labour force is vital. IT and research capability, physical infrastructure, broader tax base with low marginal rates. We need a proper regulatory framework. One of the biggest failures in the last couple of decades was the failure of regulation, particularly in the financial services sector. That is being addressed, but needs to be addressed properly. We need a functioning banking system. We need to improve the external image of Ireland. We have got an incredible amount of international coverage over the last few months, but it has been unambiguously negative. The international perception of Ireland at the moment is not positive, to put it very mildly. We have got to rebuild our external image. For a small open economy that is so dependent on foreign investment in the country, that is absolutely essential. Our banking sector, our political system, they've left us down over the last decade in terms of reputational damage. It needs to be repaired. And I suppose finally, the whole productivity imperative that has to become increasingly important. So just to summarise, and I'm almost there, Chairperson, the correction of the public finances has to continue, and government cannot succumb to vested interest groups. In my view, social partnership has been hugely responsible for the mess that we're in as a country at the moment. We cannot go back to that social partnership model, in my view. The banking crisis has got to be sorted because credit has got to flow in the economy. The competitiveness agenda is essential, because the only way you can really sort crises of unemployment, economic activity, emigration and so on is through economic activity. And we also have to restore the confidence of bond markets. And I hear people argue, and I agree at one level, we should not be beholden to bond traders in New York, Paris, London, wherever. But the reality is, if you are borrowing 18 to 20 billion per annum, you are beholden to international bond markets. So we have, over the next couple of years, got to reassure bond investors that we are doing the right things, because if we don't, our cost of borrowing will become a really serious burden on the country. Now, I just want to finally conclude on the whole area of youth unemployment. You know the numbers. We've seen a very, very sharp increase. We are now starting to experience, and we really are in danger of going to where we were in the 1980s, exporting our brightest, best young people from the country, because with that outward migration goes the productivity, the growth potential of the economy. The key role of government obviously has to be to create the macroeconomic environment where employers are willing and able to get out there and generate employment in the economy. That is extremely important. So I think the key role of government is at a macro level. But micro policies are also effective, as Paul has been highlighting. You know, there is some scope certainly for specific targeting. You know, I do think we need a much more innovative approach to work experience. I know a huge number of companies around the country that are struggling to stay in business at the moment because they've cut back their labour forces so dramatically, but they are not in a financial position to start rehiring workers. I think we need to look at some model driven by government to get employers to bring young people out of college back into their companies to help them with the business while not paying them. The state has to subsidise it. So it's all about, I think, getting young people into the workforce, getting on the job experience. But unfortunately at the moment, I think this is crucial, most employers are not in a position to pay for that, given the bottom line problems that have been experienced. We need, you know, and this sounds like an old cliche at this stage, but we need a much more innovative approach to education and training. You know, I know people with masters and PhDs who have gone to some of the state training agencies, FOSS particularly, and they've been sent on Microsoft Excel courses. You know, I ask you, we need to be much more tuned in to the requirements of the young people who are actually out of work at the moment. So that's it. I've skipped through a lot of stuff pretty quickly. I hope you'll get some messages there. I suppose my key message would be we have got to recreate the macroeconomic environment, and I've given you my views on what we need to do to achieve that. But there is also scope for a more micro approach at a government level to tackle specifically the problem of youth unemployment. But don't feel that youth unemployment is the only problem in our labour market. There is another serious problem of people in their 40s and 50s who are becoming unemployed. They actually have a lot fewer options than young people. So I think it is important to bear that in mind. So thank you very much for your attention.